I consider myself to be an avid kayaker. I love spending time out on the water where it's quiet, peaceful, and relaxing. There's nothing like spending your day out on blue-green waters, soaking up the sun, without a care in the world. Sadly, up here in North Dakota, there aren't very many options for open water recreation. Typically, people either head towards the Missouri River or to one of the more popular lakes in the state. Most places are packed with people since there isn't a lot to choose from. Now, if you're a passionate kayaker like I am, you'll know where the quiet spots are at. There are a few hidden gems throughout the state that not many people know about. And because I don't want anyone ever going there, I'm going to call my ex-favorite spot Emerald Lake instead of its actual name. I used to call it a hidden gem for a reason. This lake is gorgeous. Its water is unbelievably murky, which sounds the opposite of gorgeous, but it gives off this pretty emerald green color, and it perfectly reflects the sky and surrounding trees. The lake is surrounded by woods. It may not be exciting to you, but in North Dakota, you're lucky to see any trees at all. If you do, they are most likely planted by someone. These trees crown the edge of the lake, giving it a cozy feeling. You really feel like it's just you and the lake. Emerald is maybe 1,000 feet wide and about 3 miles long. Upon first glance, the lake looks to be nothing more than a pond. But if you get towards the back, you'll find a hidden bend that takes you further along, winding in and out of tree-studded hills. In order to get to the lake, you need to travel way back into the countryside on a maze of gravel roads, perfect for keeping this place secret. On one of my days off earlier this summer, I decided to take a kayaking trip out to my precious lake. I asked my best friend to come along with me, because I knew that we'd be the only ones there. During the weekends, you might run into 1 or 2 other people, but since I have days off during the work week, I knew we'd be out on our lonesome. Perfect for catching up on gossip with your bestie. We loaded our things and set out for a fun day. We arrived at the lake at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and, as expected, there wasn't another soul in sight. Since there's only one way into the lake, and no other vehicles, we were in the clear. You'd need to trespass onto private state land and chop down a few trees to get onto the lake in any other way. I drove down to the water's edge, and we both hopped out to unload our things. I crawled into the bed of my truck to unstrap the kayaks and prepared the paddles. I started to shift the kayaks so that I could get them out more easily. We quickly set up our kayaks and I parked my truck away from the water, in the rare case that someone else came along to enjoy the lake. Right before we launched, my friend stopped what she was doing and turned to face me, with a quizzical expression lining her face. "Did you say something?" my friend questioned. After a few moments of me giving her one of those "are you nuts" type of looks, she resumed. "I swear, I just heard someone. I mean, it sounds like a guy, but obviously you're not a man, so it confused me." I laughed and told her that she was hearing things. She grinned and shrugged it off. So we set off on our journey, enjoying each other's company while discussing the good old days of playing Skyrim for hours on end. We laughed at inside jokes, had a few snacks, drank a few brews, and discussed trivial things. We listened to the birds chirp, watched swallows dive at the bugs around us, and giggled at some very vocal ducks who didn't like being disturbed. At one point, I had paddled over a couple of mallards to try and snap a pic. It's pretty difficult to photograph grumpy waterfowl. Satisfied by what I had captured, I caught up with my friend who had floated ahead. "Did you hear that weird cow?" she asked when I caught up to her. I replied I hadn't heard anything but a couple of angry ducks. "Oh." She looked a bit confused. "I swear I actually heard something this time. It sounded like a really low, almost gravelly moo. It almost sounded like the thing was in pain. I don't know how else to explain it, other than the fact that the sound unnerved me." I gave her a puzzled look. "I don't think there are any cattle in this area." I paused for a bit. Maybe one member of the herd wandered off from somewhere nearby and got hurt, but I think the nearest area would be Price's farm about 25 miles back. We both sat silent and decided to continue on. Neither of us thought much else about it. About an hour into the trip, we reached the end of the lake, or at least what most people assume is the end. We came upon the first of many bends, knowing that we wouldn't be able to tell if anyone else arrived in the area, which was fine. I glanced over to a cluster of pretty aspen trees and saw a large hawk of some sort sitting at the top of one. Spotting a photo op, I turned to my friend and asked if she wanted to paddle to the other side of the area we were in to check out the lake. Being a less experienced kayaker, she shook her head and told me to head over there. She and I both knew that it would take twice as long if she joined me. I wouldn't have minded, but she didn't want to put in all the extra time and effort. I suggested she just kept heading straight while I checked out the hawk, and I would just meet up with her shortly. She agreed. I began to paddle over to the lovely Aspens and the majestic hawk, excited about the neat pictures I'd be getting. The closer I got, the more I began to notice the dead trees. It saddened me to see the trees I always loved, dead and decaying. The situation was sort of odd, though. Why would this entire grove of aspens be dying off? There hadn't been any flooding in several years, and we weren't in a drought currently, so why were they dying? I neared the tree with the hawk in it, cautiously, and before I could snap a pic, the beautiful bird soundlessly took flight and disappeared into the woods. Now by myself, I began to feel this creeping sensation. My skin began to crawl as if tiny little fingers were tapping each inch of my body. My hair stood up on my arms, and I got that empty feeling in your stomach when you know you're completely alone. It dawned on me that I hadn't spotted anything else in a while. No swallows swooping in and out. No irritated ducks. Not even an occasional chirp of a songbird. Nothing. It was dead silent at Emerald Lake, even for an area known for its peace and quiet. This moment was too dead. Due to missing a nice picture and being thoroughly chilled to the core, I switched directions and decided to head for my friend. Out of the corner of my eye, I could have sworn I'd seen a white aspen move. But it's idiotic. Trees don't move. My brain was just trying to scare me. I ignored it and began to paddle to my friend. I could still see her on the other side of the water and up a bit further, but she wasn't moving. She was completely stock still, not moving at all. Her face was turned from me, and she was looking at something in the trees, but I couldn't tell what it was. Fearing the worst, I started to power paddle to where she was. It would only take me a few minutes to get to her. Once I was about 10 feet from her, she must have heard me splashing the paddle in the water and turned to me. Her face was white as a sheet, and her eyes showed signs of distress. She waved me over without a word, and my eyes followed the direction she was looking. I saw what she'd been staring at. Among another set of crowded, dead trees was a dirty, cream-colored tent. Now I know what you must be thinking. So what? It's a lake. People like to camp next to lakes all the time. I must remind you, the areas surrounding the lake are technically not open to the public. Only the lake was. You'd have to hike through miles of private land to get here. The tent was ominously perched right on the edge of the water, where it threatened to be consumed by the lake. It seemed abandoned. No one was around, and the site looked like someone had left and not bothered to come back. Bits of trash and miscellaneous camping supplies littered the area surrounding the tent. The little one-man tent was covered in stains, with one side completely split open. I was too bothered by the tent to get any closer to it. Someone had left in a hurry. Chills were running up and down my spine at that point. My friend turned back to me and asked, "I thought you said you weren't really supposed to be on the land surrounding the lake." "You're not," and I reinforced that point with her. I gave her a hesitant shrug and suggested that perhaps whomever it was just didn't realize that you weren't allowed to camp out here. Of course, I didn't really believe that. I worked at a state park for a while, and you get all sorts of people. The ones who break the rules usually know that they're doing so. A lot of vagrants tend to camp out places where no one else is around, even if it's not allowed. Maybe whoever was out here knew they weren't supposed to be here, and got chased off by game and fish or something. They left in a hurry and forgot their tent, she suggested. Maybe, I had mumbled back to her. I couldn't help but wonder why game and fish, or any other authority for that matter, would let a tent just sit out in the open and wither away. I changed the subject. So, do you want to keep going? Or should we head back to shore and find some place to eat? A look of relief passed over my friend's face. I'm starving. Let's head back. I nodded in agreement. We both quickly switched directions and began to paddle away from the lone tent. We didn't get very far before finally realizing that my friend hadn't been hearing things this whole trip. It's just like she had described to me, although I didn't really understand what she had meant until now. It started off as this weird gurgling sound, and grew into this weird rumbling groan. I don't know what to call it. I see why she said it sounded like a moo. Whatever was making the sound was animalistic. It was a low pitch coming from the trees only about 20 feet away or so. Whatever it was, it did sound like it was in pain. But what sort of creature can make a sound like that? My throat was choking on my breath and my rapid heartbeat. I couldn't swallow down my fear of this sound. I knew that whatever was making the noise had to have been just to the right of us. Despite what my brain was screaming at me, I decided to turn my head and search for whatever was making the noise. I wish I hadn't. Peeking around one of the dying aspens was a creature with the palest skin I've ever seen. The thing was so white, it seemed to be able to use the white bark of the aspens to blend in. It was sort of hunched over, with only part of its body visible behind the tree. The creature was human-like in limbs, I suppose. It had 2 legs and arms, but it was skin and bone, hairless from what I could tell. A long, ovular face peered out at us. No eyes, no mouth, just horrifying indentions where they should have been. Imagine the famous The Scream painting, but instead of a screaming mouth, there was just an elongated divot. My eyes began to water. I had been staring at this thing for God knows how long. I heard my friend whimper my name. She saw it too. Without moving, I squeaked at her to paddle as quickly as possible back to shore. My arms burned with the intensity that we were moving, but we couldn't stop. Not with the rustling coming from the trees that was keeping up with us. We were only about 100 feet from shore, and the trees were beginning to thin out to almost nothing where the boat landing was. A little ways behind me, I heard a big splash. There was only one thing that could have made that. Our carp aren't that big. Faster! I screamed at my frightened friend. We were already paddling our hardest, but I didn't know if this thing could swim well or not. We finally got to shore, and the 2 of us practically dove out of our kayaks. I have to get the truck. I don't know why I was yelling when she was right there, but the adrenaline and fear were getting to me. I sprinted to the truck, fumbling around in my bag for the keys. When I finally found them, they slipped through my fingers and clattered out on the ground, just like one of those damn fools you see in horror movies. I hurriedly snatched them back up and flung myself into the truck. Rocks went flying as I hauled ass over to my friend in the kayaks. She was shaking. Any sign of it? I hollered. She shook her head. I haven't seen anything. I don't know whether I should have been relieved or not. Hurry and throw the kayaks into the back. Don't worry about strapping anything down. She did as I said, and together we lifted and tossed both kayaks and their paddles into the bed of the truck. I nearly slipped on the gravel as I ran to get into the driver's seat. I heard it again. I looked behind me to see its head breaching the water. Its empty sockets just staring at me. It was only about 15 feet from the shore. I ripped open the driver's door, and before both of our doors slammed shut, we were driving away. I didn't dare stop to check if we'd had everything, but I swear that when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw something white standing on the shoreline where we had been moments before. It's only been a week since our time at Emerald Lake, and I still have no idea what we saw that day.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you're new. I upload multiple videos just like this one every single week. Much thanks and appreciation to my friend Vidiv22 for narrating this great story written by Fyres. If you enjoyed their story, be sure to check their link down below and see more of their stuff. Check out Vidiv22's channel as well if you're a fan of all things creepy. Be sure to send in your own story if you have one to share. You can find the email in the description down below. Let me know what you think this creature could be. Definitely some creepy stuff happening in the Aspens out there, huh? See you next time.